Since Shacknews was founded in 1996, we're reflecting on the industry as it was and how it's changed since then. What are some of the development practices you used in 1996?
I mean, 1996, that wasn't even when I had joined the site, right? But certainly, like, as a sort of consumer of gaming news, I was very much aware of it. I mean, Scary Shugashack, Blues News, Redwoods, like, those were all the sort of sites you went to as a sort of gaming fan or a Quake fan, right? At that time, like me myself, like I was also like sort of dabbling in like HTML. Like, how do you make a website, right? Like, seems straightforward enough. So a lot of what I mostly remember around that time is like beyond like just having fun with people from suddenly all over the world, right? Like there's the internet and like I'm talking to people in the US or in Asia, like, oh, this is blowing my mind. And really like it's all about like that sort of like community aspect. Like, hey, we're modding this game, right? We're adding all this stuff to like Quake or Duke Nukem. We're figuring out how the internet works. And that is really like what I think back of like that sort of like mid to late 90s. That's what I remember when all of this was new, when all of this wasn't like as commercial as it is right now, and really that sort of like feel of community within gaming.
Speaking to that, like, how have you witnessed those practices changed, if at all, since you started getting into that stuff?
I mean, it really speaks to what I spoke to there, where it was a lot less commercial, right? I don't think necessarily that sort of community aspect has gone away. I mean, people are still modding games. They're still forming communities around certain like games or genres, right? But I think just overall the internet itself has clearly grown way more commercial, way more like sort of walled gardens sort of things. Way less often are you encountering sort of this like one-man site, right? That used to be way more common, where like it was just one dude in a room like writing up about whatever interested him, right? And you see way of less of that, or at least it's way more difficult to find these days, way less organic. It's all like, well, if it's not linked on like Twitter or Facebook, like how's anyone going to find it, right? So I think we certainly lost something there, but I think gaming as a thing is still as vibrant as ever, and the sort of the communities are building around games like Roblox or Fortnite. I think that just carries on what we saw back then.
You kind of got into it a little bit, but can you talk about some of the development practices from the past 25 years that you miss today? Obviously, you talked about like the one-man band thing.
Yeah, I mean, especially like my current role, where like I'm still building like server software. Like it's just so different. Like the way that me and Steve were initially updating the site was like updating HTML and then like uploading that to the FTP, and like, oh, we overrode each other's changes. Well, too bad. That's how it works. And then like a couple of years later, I think this is the late 90s or early 2000s, that we got a more professional like CMS setup, where we're like, no, we could go to a page to enter our news updates. Because clearly that's what you want. You don't want to be messing with HTML yourself. You just want to go to a website and be able to fill out the title and subject links and everything. But even that was just so different compared to everything that is sort of expected now. Like as far as like, oh, you need to be on like AWS or like Google Cloud because you need to be able to scale, right? Like all that sort of infrastructure has gotten way more complicated. Now, granted, there are sites that certainly still sort of solve this for you, but it's like when it comes to like JavaScript, like it used to be like so simple and straightforward when I think back like 20 years ago, versus like all the things that like change every year now, mostly for the better. But it certainly, I feel that the sort of barrier to entry has been raised quite a bit the past couple of decades.
So again, you kind of mentioned a little bit on the flip side of that question. What modern development practices do you feel are superior to what you used, 15, 25 years ago?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is definitely the notion of like source control, where like we all check into this repository and then we push out the changes, than like, oh, I'm stomping on your change because I just happened to upload this version of a file to the FTP site, and now you lost your changes. Sorry about that. That sort of stuff, like version control, being able to build a thing once and it works on like desktop PCs or mobile devices, that sort of stuff. That's all for the better, for sure. Yeah.
So since 1996, we've gone from PlayStation 1 to 5. Xbox has had 4 models. Nintendo Switch continuing to dominate the handheld market, and PC hardware continuing to drive technology. What are some trends over the past 25 years that you remember as steps forward for the industry in terms of like development, distribution, and marketing?
Ooh, that's a tougher one. Let me think about that. I think it's mostly funny whenever you see, like when something new is announced, like whether that is like the new generation of hardware or just a certain sequel for a game. So many times, like the first few things you see people post, so they're like, I don't really see like a fidelity difference at all here. I'm like, are you sure? Like, if you go back like 10 years, like you think there's no difference, but like look at like how big that difference is, like when it comes to visual fidelity. Like people just have this thing in their mind that like, oh, I don't see a difference between this and the previous game, or like this and the previous like PlayStation or whatever. It's like, no, it's like your mind is fooling yourself. Like, go look at the screenshots. Like, there's just a massive difference there. And then I think you asked there about marketing, and I think over the past like 20 years, there's like just so many more games coming out all the time. Right? Like, I think I've seen a certain like stat linked for like the Steam library, where like sort of like crazy exponential growth, especially like I think the last 5 years even. There's just so much more like games competing for people's interest. So then you also just see the way that these things are marketed, being marketed changed so much, right? Back in the day, it's just like online ads, some magazine spreads, that's it, right? Then you had a lot more TV commercials, and now it's all about getting the attention for like streamers and influencers, right? That's definitely a big way that marketing for these products has changed.
What industry changes have surprised you the most over these last 25 years?
Probably the sort of explosion when it comes to mobile gaming and the sort of related business model there that you then also see back reflected to PC games in that sort of like free-to-play model. I mean, definitely like we weren't covering those sort of games 20 years ago at all, and like finally the sort of mobile hardware caught up to where it could also do cutting edge games, or at least have gaming input where you weren't messing with like a keyboard or something like that. The sort of touchscreen aspect really changed a lot, but that I think is definitely what I think of, like, hey, what is the sort of thing that really changed this? Like, yeah, just the introduction of like mobile gaming in general, like where it just exploded, where everyone is doing this sort of Candy Crush or like Crash of the Clan sort of stuff, and then also that sort of monetary model then making its way back into other games.
Gaming hardware and software have changed in so many ways since 1996. What aspects of the industry do you feel need more work before we turn our attention to what comes next?
Whoa, I don't know. That's a tough one. I'm not sure that I have an answer there. That's
and you mentioned like free to play is kind of a big deal. You know, that's something that wasn't around 20 years ago, but that's starting to become more and more common. In fact, even as a YouTube moderator on our site, like kids are expecting all games now to just be free to play. Like they don't want to pay a purchase. Oh, this is an online game, it should immediately be free to play. Like, so it's that privilege is starting to show for the younger generations.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. But I mean, I think you phrase it as something like that we should like sort of like fix or change before like what comes next. But I'm not really sure that is sort of the genie that you can't put back in the bottle, right? I mean,
it's like asking you
the
to
model itself like has already like changed perception, but also just even if it's not free to play, the sort of general model of payments, right? Where like before free to play was all of these like $1 or $2 iPhone games, right? That changed people's perceptions of like how much they should be paying for a thing. And then free to play is like, okay, yeah, this super sweet game is totally free. I mean, yeah, you're paying constantly, but like that sort of base expectation is free, right? And then the last few years, you have the sort of Microsoft Game Pass model, right? Where it's like, oh, $15 and you can play this huge library of games, which is really like awesome for gamers for sure. I mean, it's Netflix and the Spotify model, right? Like you pay this low price and you have this unimaginable library available to you. But from like an industry perspective, though, like that is tough, right? Like previously, like you had your sort of like $60 game because you need that $60 price point. Honestly, $60 is probably a bit low because you have these mega million budgets. You're supporting like hundreds of employees. How do you make that work when the sort of base expectation of gamers is like, hey, yeah, online multiplayer, like that should be free. Like, sure, I'll buy these packs, but like I'm not gonna give you any money up front. And ideally, this game is included in my Game Pass, right? I want to play this low monthly fee. So I think that is going to be a challenge. You probably will see more industry consolidation if that's the sort of thing that people continue to expect, and if other players in the market also are going to introduce Game Pass type things, right? Again, totally awesome for gamers, no doubt about it, but I do think it's a tough proposition for the industry itself.
Where would you like to see video games go in the future, or where do you think they'll go in the future?
Probably just even more online connected, more the sort of crossover model. Like I think Fortnite especially has been really interesting as far as like bringing in totally different IP, whether that's from gaming or just like movies, pop culture, having those sort of in-game concepts, right, or movie trailers. I think that's really unique, and I could definitely see that happening more and more, where it's not just like a sort of game that you're playing, but it's really more of a hub to all sorts of related content. I mean, more and more people are going to be upgrading their devices, getting faster internet. So definitely, I think that sort of like online connectedness of everything is only going to continue to grow.
When you were working on the site many years ago, did you ever think it would turn 25 and still be around with so many other sites leaving and going away or being lost just to time?
I mean, it is certainly like a really awesome milestone. Like for everyone involved, like whether at the beginning or now, like I think that's something to be super proud of. Because yeah, as you say, like so many of these sites have fallen by the wayside, or like have gotten like taken over by larger properties and then sort of like disappeared that way. 25 years is just really in any industry, right? In any industry, I think that 25 years is just really impressive, and yeah, that's why I'm super excited that we're able to celebrate that this year for sure. Yeah, again, like 25 years, like just such an awesome milestone, and even though it's weird, where like like a while, like sometime last year, like my time with Gearbox had actually been longer than it was with Shacknews, which like 10 years ago would have been like unimaginable to me. But like that side and working there and meeting people, like that was most of my 20s, right? Like that's really where I sort of grew up and really really instilled like what I wanted to do and the sort of people that I wanted to work with, the sort of community that I wanted to be in. And again, it's just so awesome that 11 years later, like I'm here to talk about the site. Like it's still around. It's having this anniversary celebration, and certainly like when I started, I couldn't have imagined that. When I left at the time, I certainly hoped it would continue to stick around. And yeah, I'm just thrilled that it's still here and that it's still entertaining and informing the gaming masses for sure. So everyone should do it for Shacknews.